Hello and welcome back to Stu's Structures. We're here to start a new video on some buildings from another town that I need to model. So we're going to look at the city of Belington, West Virginia, so stay tuned. So welcome back. I am Mark Stewart. This is Stu's Structures. I do have several buildings from another town at the other end of my layout when I get ready to build it that I want to start putting together. I still have several buildings to build for the Grafton area, and several of them are just really complex builds. A couple of them are not too bad. But anyway, I want to do some of these simpler structures from another town, and the town that I live in is called Belington. And it was the it was the union of the B&O Railroad in Western Maryland, as most people know it in more modern times. In early times, there were 4 railroads that met here in Belington. So we're just going to take a look at the town here and the buildings that were here back early on. And I'm going to show you some of the things I want to model, some things I'm debating whether I'm going to model or not. But there was a lot of unique structures in the town of Belington. So we're just going to take a look at all those, and I'm going to kind of try to make up my mind during this period of time what I'm going to go into next. So thanks for coming back, and sit back and enjoy the town of Belington. Now I do have this valuation map of Belington from right after the turn of the century. You can see, it's spread out over a good sized little area. There's only certain areas of this I'm going to model, but this was a big town. I mean, there was a racetrack up in that upper right hand corner, which was a big horse racetrack. There was a steel mill. There's just all kinds of industry and stuff. Belington was really a major town at that point in time. And then I come down to this second part. I'm just going to blow up sections of that and kind of go into sections of it individually and add some other stuff in along the way. But we get down into this north end of Belington here, and there was a Y track. And this was the end of the B&O here in Belington, and it met up with, originally it was the West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh, but later became the Western Maryland Railroad. And so the B&O needed a way to turn their locomotives. There was a small turntable at one point. It doesn't show up on this evaluation map. It may have been gone by this time. I'm not sure. That the Belington and Northern used on the other side of the railroad or the river. But it was narrow gauge, so it could not have been used to turn the B&O standard gauge locomotives. So this Y was used for that purpose. And up at the end of the Y there was industries, and this shows a few different things. I mean, lumber was a big production thing for this area. There was a lot of lumber produced in the state of West Virginia, and you see lumber facilities down here, and then up at the end of the track there's several other facilities. And on this other map, which is just a blown up section of a Sanborn map that I have, you see a handle factory, which was came in a little later in life, probably a little after this evaluation map was made. This map, the Sanborn map, is from 1923, so not too long after that. But this handle factory would have survived into the beginning, or close to around the area the time period that I model. So I don't have any good pictures of this, so I'm gonna have to do some research and see what I can come up with this. But at least this gives me a footprint for that building if I want to. Now I do have this other picture, and I'm not sure if this was here or whether it was over in the industrial area, but I do have this picture of a planing mill. Now it's a nice facility, and it would have been a good structure to model and use here in town. Now I'm not sure if I want to include it here on the Y, or just delete it all together. If it was over the industrial area, I need to do a little more research and find out a little bit more about this one. But I do have a picture of it I would want to use. It would give me an idea of the structures and the type of a setup and how it was laid out to go by and start from if I did want to build it. I do have this one picture, aerial picture of where the Y was. You can see in this photograph that the Y has been removed. The one wood industry that was way down the Y is gone at this point. But what was the handle factory, and I'm not sure at this point in time whether it was still the handle factory or whether it had been turned into some other wood industry, but basically, it shows some layout of the structure and something to go by to work on stuff for this area as well. Now, jumping back to that same section of that map at the other end of the railroad there, you see there's several tracks that come into a freight house. And the freight house was a good sized freight house and had a real long platform out from it, and several tracks that came in and fed the platform, as well as 2 tracks that came back in and fed a big parking lot area as well. There was a lot of various stuff that moved in and out of the town of Belington. This was just a good sized town of Belington. So let's just start off with the freight house here to begin with. I do have a couple of good shots of this and a couple of so-so shots of the freight house. This is definitely a structure that I will be building, and probably one of the first ones that I'll video and put up on my channel. But it's really a nice building. I don't have a ton of good pictures of it, but I do have somewhat of a blueprint of the building, so I do have something to work from on this, so that'll be a nice structure to begin with. And right across the street, there's another building here that was one of the earliest industrial type buildings in the city, which was gone by my modeling time period. But I really like the building, and it was very historical for the town here, so I'm going to go ahead and build it and add it on my layout anyway. And this was called the Ice House, and basically it was a small roller mill. It had, it made ice for the town. Originally, ice was cut out of the river in the winter and stored in big buildings with, straw on the walls, and lasted till, the heat of midsummer. So they had ice most of the year. But then along came this building, and also this structure was the first building in town that provided electricity. So, besides producing electricity for its own means, it also supplied electricity to the city hall for the first time, and, 1 or 2 places that were really critical to have electric early in this town's history. So it was just, a very significant building in the city of Belington. And even though it was gone by my time period, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and model this, and it's a very nice, unique looking structure. So why not, right? Now this next map brings us down into the center or the heart of the town of Belington itself. And you can see here where that track that we were on before comes on into town. As it comes down close to where this bridge crosses the river, there's a station on either side of the bridge street there. There's a building between the railroad and the river, which is a real tight building. There's an iron span that crosses the river. And as we come on down the railroad side, there's a water tank, a pump house, a section house. There's some stock pens on down the siding. There's just, a lot of structures and small stuff that needs to be built for this area here. So we're going to take a look at several of those and see what we have for reference for some of that. Now another building that really was gone by my time period, but I want to go ahead and model install on the railroad anyway. This station here was from one of the other 4 railroads that came into Belington. It was a Weaver Coal Company railroad, and it went up along Laurel Mountain to a small town called Weaver, where they had tons of coke ovens and coal mines and that type of thing up there. And it was a good sized business. They had coal docks and stuff in several other parts of the country, and it was quite a large enterprise actually. But they had their own railroad, and this station was on one side of that street that came down to the bridge across the river. So I'm going to include this building in my structures as well. I just think it's a really unique, nice station building, and deserves to be represented on my railroad. As we come on across that road down to the other side of that street, in the last picture there was a little eave of a building. There was originally a wooden station used as the Union Station between West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh Railroad and the B&O Railroad. And then, right after the turn of the century, the B&O took that down and rebuilt this other station. So this other station was a nice brick station. I do have plans for this. A terracotta roof, more of a Spanish style of a railroad station, which this one and the one at Philippi were real similar in their construction, but very unique for the B&O in a lot of ways. They didn't use this type of construction in a lot of places, but there were two of them here in Barber County, and this one here in Belington is really a nice representation of that style of building. So we're going to include that on the model railroad as well. Another nice structure that was here in Belington as well was the water tower. It was a nice old classic wooden water tower. Now the two pictures I have here of the one in Belington, they're not real clear, but I do have a set of standard plans, and this appears to be built according to standard plans. And I do have a few other pictures of one similar, like this third picture here, which gives me good ideas of actual representation picture wise of what was there. And the one in Belington did have a separate water column across the two tracks to water the locomotives on the other side of the tracks as well. So this picture, even though it's not Belington, is a good representation of what would have been in Belington. Now you can see here in this final, well, I've got one other shot to put up, but this third picture of the railroad, you can see where the Belington Northern crosses across the river. Now there are pilings, wooden supports, or stone supports that are still there in the middle of the river even to this day from this bridge. It was just an iron span bridge, and it came across. At one time they did have a little turntable down in here, but by this time it was gone, even though railroad was still in existence. But you can see the stock pens at the top left-hand corner of the photograph. It had two pens and a loading area and a loading chute. The water tower that was down there actually had an underground line that came down to this point, and there was a water source for the stock pens here as well. And another small support building there, and basically there was a lot of buildings from the city that backed up to this, so we'll kind of go into a few of, but you can see all the various other railroads that converged into this. The Coal and Coke Railroad came up into this Belington Northern met it as a narrow gauge railroad. The the Weaver, Coal Company Railroad came down into this. The West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh, which became the Western Maryland, came down into this, and the B&O, even though during my time periods had trackage rights clear to Elkins, and you really didn't see a whole lot of Western Maryland and Belington at that point. They did most of their interchanging in Elkins, but at this point there was still a lot of Western Maryland coming into Belington from time to time. And so this even though there's not a lot on this map, some of it will have to be built in place. I'm not going to build it. Well, I don't know. I may pre-build the stockyards. We'll have to see as I go into things what I do. I'm probably not going to include all these buildings and small stuff for the Belington Northern Railroad. I do have some photographs and stuff of that, but I don't think it's anything I'm going to model. After I do everything right along the railroad, I'm not really sure how far into the town itself and Main Street that I'm going to go. This first building here was Keller Confectionery, and it's a building we're going to do. I mean, it was right next to the back side of the Weaver Railroad building, so it just makes sense to do that on that same side street. This next building was called Kane and Kaiser, and it was just basically a general merchandise store, but there was just railroad car after railroad car came into the back of this for supplies that came into town to supply the population here with everything that it needed. And so it's a nice siding to do some railroad action on. And this next one was called Valley Grocery. It became the Golden Rule, and it's also right there close to the Kane and Kaiser building, but it also had railroad tracks that came back into the backside of it to do the same thing that was done at Kane and Kaiser. And this building is just a very unique building. I like these big old brick buildings with all the advertising painted on the sides of them. This building still exists. It actually has an elevator that's operated by water displacement, and it just has a big tank that they pump water into to displace the weight of whatever's in the elevator to make the elevator go up and down in the building. It's one of the few in the world that are still existing like this, and up to a few years ago, I know it was operating. They have the city has went together and got a hold of this building, and they're trying to restore the building, and I'm hoping that the operation of the elevator will be restored, and that'll, because it's just a unique piece of mechanical engineering. And on the other side of this building was at that time an old wooden mill, which was the first mill in the downtown of Belington. And I do have this picture and a couple of other odd long distance shots of the building, so it will be neat to be attached to the side of that building as well. Another really unique and very historical structure that's in Belington, and I'm going to find a way to build this and use it on the layout. Now, this was back across the other side of the main street from the railroad, so this was a block away from the railroad, but this was called Luzerne Hotel. And it was just a really huge, nice, old Victorian style hotel. And a lot of individuals came here and stayed in Belington, and this was always the choice hotel to stay in. But one of the unique pieces of history about this hotel is that Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Mr. Firestone and other famous people would come and meet here in this hotel. And from here they would go on hunting and fishing expeditions in the nearby area of West Virginia. So, there were a lot of famous people that stayed here and knew of Belington. It was just really a nice building. I mean, this would be quite a structure to undertake as far as building the numbers of windows and doors and dormers and everything involved in this structure. So it will not be one of the earlier structures that I will build, but I'm going to find a way to include this somehow and work it into the layout. I think you can't do Belington and not represent this structure on it somehow. It's just, it needs to be done. There was one industry that, I'm not going to take my railroad as far as this was, but on the very south end of town, there was actually an iron or steel works at one time. Even still to this day, when you drive out the southern end of Belington on Route 250-119, there is a concrete structure right next to the highway, which was the corner footer for one of these corners of this building. And across the bottom, you can still see where it was. It was not a real long-lasting company. I don't know if it was poor management or funding or what the situation was. It was trying to be reborn as a couple of other things, but it just never survived, so it didn't last a real long time. But that you can see by the buildings and this ironwork here, it was a huge facility and was really a large industry for the area for the short time that it did exist here. I'm just going to bring this to a close here with a few odd shots and various things that I have in my collection. Research is something that everybody should do for what they're modeling. A lot of people don't get into it. It's kind of my thing. But all this here is really local history, and I really researched the county I live in. I probably have one of the largest collections of Barber County history that's ever been put together. And just several of these shots, from the little building that started off there to begin with, to some of these, locomotives setting in yards, to old railroad bridges being built, and passenger trains or whatever. They're just, a great piece of history that needs to be preserved. And a lot of times private collections just get ruined or thrown away as the younger kids come up and the parents die or grandparents pass on, and a lot of this gets lost, and it can never be replaced. Once it's gone, it's gone. So I encourage everybody to go out and talk to the elder people in the local communities, and find out what their knowledge is, what kind of photographs maybe that they have, just if they only have one that's worth scanning and getting a digital image of. A lot of people think this stuff's really valuable, which some of it is, but most people are always willing to let you take a picture of a picture or digitize it or something, and then there's a permanent record of that forever. 100 years from now, some people may think that was totally nuts for doing the things that I do, because none of this will matter to anybody about anything. But I really enjoy doing it, and it's knowledge to me. I'm always looking to learn things, and when it comes to local history, it's something that we're not taught in schools. So if you want to learn this kind of stuff, you have to go out and find out for yourself. Sometimes you can research in libraries, but a lot of times it's just talking to the elder people in your community and the people that work for the railroads and that type of thing, where you find the best information and pictures and things to work from. So I just encourage everybody to go out there and try to save as much of that history as you can. So there you have a little look at the town of Belington. Belington was, a good-sized industrial town at one time. It had a horse race track and iron works, just tons of stuff here for that early period of time. It was an amazing little city. And, now it's been reduced down to not much. It still does operate the railroad, a scenic excursion, and some freight out of the area here. It took over from CSX. And so it's still in operation. But back in the day, there was a lot of nice buildings, a lot of unique things, as you've seen in this video, and I do want to model a bunch of those. Now, some of these I think I'm going to go ahead and model anyway, even though the period of time I actually modeled, they were gone by that period. But they're just very unique structures, and I would like to have them represented on the railroad for a historical point. Plus, it also gives me sightings for doing some freight movements as well, even though they were from a previous time period. But I like the steam air, and I like a lot of this stuff that was here early on. So my next video, I'm going to start into modeling some of this, and we'll work on the town of Belington for a little while, and then revisit Grafton at another point in time. So thank you again for coming back and sharing this time with me. I do appreciate it. There's a lot of these little towns out there, and you probably live in one or close to one that you want to model. So if you follow along with my videos, you'll learn how to build those structures. At least that's my hopes. And I can answer questions from comments below or anything like that to help you if I can. I do have a request to do something, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do a video on it and incorporate it in some of the buildings that I do. One of these Belington videos kind of gives, it's not exactly like the guy I really wanted, but I think it would give him an idea how to build what he wanted to do. It won't be the first structure I build, but anyway, well, I'm going to try to look at doing some of that. But anyway, I like to help you when I can. So hit the subscribe button down below and follow me, and you'll be notified if you hit the bell when I've got new videos and stuff coming out. I try to get one out every week. I think that will continue on for a little while, especially with coronavirus. I'm kind of stuck here, although my nursery and things like that do keep me quite busy, even though I can't go anywhere else. But I did get a lot of stuff done earlier in the year, and I'm continuing to work on structures. So for a while, we'll get one out every week. I try to do them on Fridays, and you know, send this stuff out to friends of yours. Let them know that I'm out here. You know, like and share this with people in the hobby. A lot of people want to know how to scratch build and just don't know where to begin, and it's not that hard. So by watching me make mistakes, you can learn and show others what not to do and how to do it right, maybe. In any case, I do thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me. Grab some stuff out there and start scratch building and playing with your trains, and just happy model railroading.